I don't have any nice spiel and such amazing insights as Nandita just gave. So please excuse me, this being the last class, I just wanted you to have a good time. I'm just going to tell you a story. No amazing insights about how to conduct a class. But this is just my experience with, well, what I used to think is a large class, but having listening to people here, I have changed mind about that. It's not a large class. People are teaching really large classes, so I guess that's why, Anyway, the story is ME 308, which is Industrial Engineering and Operations Research course. It's a ME BTech core course, and they happen to take it in their 6th semesters, which brings in a lot of challenges. And the challenges I'll kind of talk about, because one being that they've been doing sort of technical courses, so suddenly getting them to a more analytical, more mathematical course. During the initial few years, the feedback read, why is this an ME class? It should be a math class. We don't want to take math courses in our 6th semester just before our placements. So yeah, all those challenges kind of keep coming, and the biggest challenge for me was to somehow inculcate some integrity into them, which I found that, what my professors told me that, hey, the students before you were much better. And, I kind of now realize why they were saying so. Success used to be important for us. And I think that success, when you talk about success at any cost, that cost seems to have not been mattering anymore. They just want to get a good grade, whatever they might have to do for it. Especially, when this really is before their grad school admissions or placements. So I'll come back to some of these challenges later. So these are the student strengths over the 5 years that I've been teaching this class. Starting from 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23. That's just, I didn't pay too much heed to what was happening here, but thankfully I've highlighted the numbers. It started with 170, 164, 169, 189 and 227 the last spring that I just taught this class. And there was a critical event in 2021. It was not COVID. I'll tell you that. It was something that changed how I had to rethink about my strategy, how I should go about teaching this class. Prior to this critical event, this course was like a usual large theory course. It had assignments, some activities, an NSEM. So I have never had an in-class exam all these 5 years. So while I've had exams before that critical event, I've never had an in-class exam. So these were primarily take-home exercises. They were allowed to do things in groups. They could use internet. But the thing was that they could not verbatim copy from a resource. I wanted them to learn how to cite. I wanted them to learn how to use things that are available to understand and write in their own words. And for the first 2 years, it was working. Because the questions were not something like which you would find online. They really had to think through them. The exam, the first time I tried, when I told them, oh, it's going to be open internet to take home, they were actually scared. They're like, no, we want an in-class exam. And then some students who were like, oh, but then you know what? Don't enforce a 2 or 3 hour time. Just let us do things. I was like, okay, I'll do what? I'll order food for you guys. We start at 9, and you take as much time as you want. At some point when you're satisfied, just give me your answer scripts and we'll leave. It worked amazingly well. I was not expecting that, but students actually said the exam was invigorating. I have never heard a student say an exam was invigorating. So, something was working. Anyway, and for the, when we went towards NSEM, it was a similar exercise, but this time they agreed to have a take home. And I remember a student coming to me saying that, you know what, I found an answer to this somewhere. Then I was like, then why did you not write it? It's like I couldn't understand it. That was one time I was really proud of what I was doing. I was like, if I can inculcate just some integrity into these guys, that's a big win for me. I don't care if they understand any OR or if they remember any OR 5 years from now, but this is something that's going to stick with them. Now, the critical event that I'm talking about, which I'm going back to, is when things went online. And it turns out that teaching integrity to kids online is not a good thing. It's not good for learning. It's not good for your feedback. It's not good for a lot of other things. And, because at that point they'd learn pretty well how to get around a theory course, especially if you're giving just exams and nothing more. So I've kind of given you, an insight into what was. This course was a regular theory course. We would do some exercise. Once in a while, I'll take them out for lunch just to sort of getting to know. Because for me, the most important thing, when I sort of started teaching this medium to large class, was that as Nandita was pointing out, sometimes when you want to point to some student to know if they're understanding or not, because usually you see blank faces and I have no idea whether, so for me that communication was very important, and not knowing their names makes it all the more harder. I hate just pointing at someone. He's like, can you please tell me what's going on, or so I would take them out in groups, trying to learn their names, trying to get to know them better. And over time, I think we had built a good rapport where a lot of them wanted to learn about optimization all the more. And then, so it kind of was working well. One of the bigger challenges with this class, again, apart, when we talk about diverse group, is that most students have already started taking IUR minors before their 6 semesters. So this course is placed such that if someone gets excited about, let's say, OR, there is no time left to pursue a minor unless they really convert to a IIIT program. And for those who have already started taking a minor, they've already taken 3 courses, and so this being a first course in OR for mechanical engineering students doesn't really bode well. So there are this mix of group, one who think, well, the material is really trivial for us. The other is like, wait, what the hell is going on? So dealing with all these challenges kind of led to sort of this critical event that I was talking about. So what had happened was that this course, I think I should tell you a little bit about the methodology in terms, or rather the conduct of this course. So there are 2 parts to the course. There is IE, there is OR, Industrial Engineering and Operations Research. And there are 2 instructors who teach this course. One who's specifically teaching Industrial Engineering, the other who's me teaching OR to them. And usually I, dealing with methodologies and algorithms and things, I kind of go first, and then the other instructor takes over, which, and they talk about how to apply those techniques. And we thought that's a good way to go about doing things. It turns out that, I would teach until the theoretical stuff, I'll teach until mid-semester, and then I'll have a exam that'll be for the OR part. And when I gave them that question paper that year, a lot of them, just blatantly copied to a point where people were just taking snapshots from internet and just pasting them, and this was after clear instructions as to what referencing means. So then I try to make a point to them saying that, hey, I can grade only your work. This is not your work, clearly. It is someone else's work. So how can I grade you for that? And hoping that they would understand. They did not. As it so happens that, they took all of that out on my feedback. So at that point, but I kind of really value that feedback, emotional or not. But that made me think that, hey, you know what? You really need to think about how do you want to run this course, because clearly at that point I had no idea that, we'll be back to in-room classes. So if I want to do this again, I need to really change how I want to conduct this. Thankfully, the classes kind of, came back and students were back in classrooms. And I think for the batch that came back, I think mine was the first class that they started taking. So again, it was kind of nice when they came. But at that point, I had decided that I'll ask them to do projects in this class. Several reasons. One was that most of them had the complaints that whatever they're learning, to most of them seems very theoretical. Where are the applications? And however many applications I can tell them, unless they have a hands-on feel, it doesn't get through to them. So that was kind of the motivation. But where to get, if a class of 189 students, how do I find projects for them? So what I decided, the methodology to do this was,
what you think was working in the pre-pandemic era, and how were you able to inculcate integrity in them? And why did you think that did not work in the online mode?
I guess at some point they just knew that this person is trying to, work really hard to come up with questions that enhance our understanding. Oh, another thing was that, I was taking, so the class is structured as 306 credit course, no tutorials, no practicals. But I was, for anyone who needed any extra help, because I knew that there were students who were finding it hard. So for them, I'll take extra tutorials to sort of help them with understanding. What? Yeah. They kind of realized after a couple of assignments that, that the scope of learning, if you want to learn, is decent in this course. And given that, once they learn that there are applications in finance, they definitely do come up. The kind of, so I do tell them about the projects that I'm involved in as well, the kind of problems we're solving. And then they realize that, oh yeah, you know what, this could be a pretty good course if I want to do consulting or finance. That's what they start with, that's good enough to get their attention. And slowly they eventually realize what is really happening. For this, when they came back, I had kind of told them that there are no exams in the class. I think I was pretty tired with doing exams, primarily because if you give 189 kids open-ended questions, you'll get 189 open-ended responses as well. And some of them write really long answers. If you ask them to be, if you give them, let's say, 1 page to write there, you're curtailing my style. I can't write this answer. If you expect a good answer from me, I can't do this in 1 page. There were a lot of challenges. So I decided, okay, you know what? No exams. I'll just try this project-based instruction and see how it goes. So what we decided to do at that point was to give them an overview of what OR is and what IE is in the first 3 weeks, so that they have an insight into what is possible through these tools that we will be learning during the course. And at that point, we will ask them to figure out a problem they want to work on that really excites them. That may be whatever. Could be, but you do have to, before you finalize the project, the problem that you're working on, you have to get your proposal approved by one of the instructors. And at that point, they were completely sort of taken aback, because 2 weeks after they came saying that they don't have anything. I think one of the hardest things for them to do is, well, they're pretty good at solving problems, which I guess most of you might agree with. If you give them a problem, they'll probably solve it. But coming up with problems is not something they're very good at. So they were struggling a lot. So at some point, I kind of hand-holded them with a couple of meetings to figure out a problem they really wanted to work on. And by mid-semester, we had enough project proposals. So the project size, the group size was 4 students. So 180 would be around 45, 46 groups. And incidentally, they all chose OR projects. I don't know what vendetta they had against me, or if they really liked me, but they none of them chose IE projects. They all chose OR projects, and we decided that we'll mentor accordingly. And at that point, it was the mode of evaluation for this particular kind of conduct of course was that I was meeting with every single group every week. So 45 groups, 9 groups a day. They can't meet between, the class times 2 to 5, they can't meet. So if you want to have meetings after 5 or between 12:30 to 1. So I'll have one group between 12:30 to 1, and 5 to 9, I'll take up the remaining of the groups. And this happened from Monday to Friday. Some of them will come up with some excuses during the first couple of weeks that, hey, we can't come to this meeting. And while I'll give them some, I'll give them an emotional spiel that, I'm here until 9 p.m. So I request that you also sort of come around. At some point, they started understanding all of that, this guy is, weird, messing his schedule. So let us be a little nice to him. And they started showing up. Now, what this did was that even though in classes, so this was one of the bigger problems, because I also don't enforce attendance. Through this way of evaluating them, mentoring them, one was that I was meeting with them in groups of 4. So I could, I learned all their names. It's very easy. Yeah, I mean, it's very easy when you're meeting them 4 at a time. You can eventually learn their names. You learned what they were working on because you were meeting them every week, right? But what this did for those guys was that he is paying personal attention to me and the problem that I want to solve. And these problems were not trivial problems. They were asked to not pick up trivial problems. These problems, so one of the projects, which was one of my favorites, was how to fold a rigid, let's say if you have a rigid object with creases, how to decide which crease becomes a valley fold and which one becomes a hill fold. So origami based optimization project, so that it all compresses down into the minimum surface area, minimum volume. I could not think of this problem myself, and some student came up with this on their own. And that was brilliant. That was mind-blowing to me. And at that point, I was like, yeah, you know what? This is the way to go about this project, because I get to learn a lot of stuff myself. And they are enjoying it too. So one of the teams was solving interlinking of rivers in India. One of them was solving a rake linking problem for Indian Railways. One of them was doing, some advanced version of Wordle, because they were just interested in puzzles. One of them was trying to come up with a bound for minimum number of entries in a 3-dimensional Sudoku. I didn't care what the problem was, as long as it excited them and as long as they were using tools that were available in the class. So it was definitely not easy in the sense that, doing this over whatever 9-10 weeks, meeting every single team. So after the course ended, I had a major withdrawal. We'll talk about that some other time. But
entire course evaluation was the project.
Entire course evaluation was the project. At the end of it, so there was in-semester evaluation through these meetings, right? They were supposed to, every meeting when they came, met me, we discussed about, what we had discussed last time. So they were asked to maintain a project diary. They were asked to record the minutes of the meeting that we were doing, to work on what was discussed, make smaller goals. I think what this did for them, there were a bunch of other things we did, but what this particular thing did for them was it kind of made the learning about failures easy. When they receive a 0 in an exam and everyone else has scored more than 0 in the exam, it's always hard to take that. But when they realize, if this approach is not working, 3 weeks into these things, I don't have anything to show for it. But once you make them realize that, hey, at least you learned about what doesn't work, that's enough to show for. Making them realize that things not working is still good. You've learned something. And I think that really helped them understand that, failures are not as bad as we think it is. Especially there was one team that really, everything they tried did not work, but eventually in the present they were super scared. Like, what are we going to do? Everyone is coming up with awesome graphs, awesome charts. We don't have anything. But I just told them to talk about everything they've tried and why did they think it didn't work. And, at the end, they also got a good grade. Now, there's so much about the way this course has been kind of. So we had every Saturday we'll have about the integrity part. So what I was doing, we'll all meet in the ME auditorium. Most of us, I'll bring in popcorn. We'll have a movie evening, and the movies will be Dead Poets Society, October Sky, Last Lecture by Randy Pausch, which, I was not saying anything at the time, but they were just observing things. They were learning through their own at that point, they'll just leave quietly. First time they made a lot of mess. I stayed back. They saw I was cleaning up. Next time, not a single one dropped anything on the floor.
Is there a way of doing this without compromising the work-life balance of the faculty? I understand your life is intertwined because you have engaged with them personally, but not all faculty members can afford to do that.
I completely understand. And that was what I learned after the first iteration of this course. I was like, this is not sustainable. I can't keep doing this. I'll go nuts. I'll have to retire very early if I keep doing this. So for the next iteration, so all these years, the first 4 times that I had 0 TAs, no TAs. That was the challenge, right? Because if you give them open-ended questions, you can't expect a TA to grade an open-ended answer, whatever rubric you might give them. I'm kind of a control freak, so which is sort of slowly settling down. I mean, as I've understood that relinquishing control is not a bad thing, but yeah.
The entire group got the same grade.
No, they did not.
How did you manage that?
Those in class, those meetings. Yeah, those meetings, one-on-one meetings that we had. So whether they came to class or not was not mandatory, but attendance in meetings was mandatory. That you have to meet with me as a group. You're not supposed to, you have a Tech Fest event. So one of the guys was a Tech Fest coordinator. I actually asked him to be there, and he was there in 2 minutes because, I kind of just told him that you can pick this or you can try to do this again next time. So I guess at some point they understood that coming to meetings was important, mandatory, classes are fine. And by doing this, I was still able to give them tools that they at least needed for their own projects, which eventually turned out to be most of what I was teaching them anyway. So while it is hard for me to, well, you know, kind of not mandate attendance and go through the pains of ensuring there is attendance through biometric methods or through just taking a photo. Some people just take a photo and tell them, oh, I have AI algorithms that will figure out who was present and who was not. Whether you have it or not is a secondary thing. But yeah, but there are all these things that I did not want to engage in. But I just made sure that if they're present for meetings, they'll get to learn something through that. Coming to how to make it sustainable, right? So this...
Would this have been more fruitful for the students had it been done in their second or fourth semester?
Yeah, so this is something I've been trying to do. Students have been saying that in their feedbacks as well, that I wish this course was in the third semester or the fourth semester, where I could get an insight into what else mechanical engineering has to offer. You know, could take an IO or minor. So we do field trips as well. That's another thing I missed out. So field trips, you know, I thought that field trips are going to be super hard because, well, first of all, who should I ask? Like, who will let me in with a bunch of students into their, you know, offices or in, you know, manufacturing plants or whatever. But thankfully, through these, you know, relationships that you can foster through sponsored projects or otherwise, there are a lot of people who are open to having IIT students come in and learn about what they're doing. So I don't live on campus, so my next door neighbor is a high-ranking officer in HUL. He just asked me, oh, you want to bring students? You can bring them to HUL. I was like, great. You don't know what you're, you know, signing up for, but sure, it solves my problem. But again, they have some constraints on how many students you can bring. So, of course, I can't take the entire 200 students there. It's usually 40 to 60. But we do multiple of these. So, you know, if a person gets to do at least one. So, we've taken them to HUL, we've taken them to delivery premises in Bhiwandi, where they get to see their brain fades when they understand that the error rate is 3 in 1 lakhs. 3 packages, I mean, doesn't matter if the, you know, thing is torn or not. Understanding how my Amazon package gets to me is like, just opens up their brain juices. We took them to railway control room in CST, where they saw this amazing, I mean, that was fascinating for me. You could track where every local train is. But whatever they were, you know, kind of told about, it got them excited about Indian Railways after all. I can keep lecturing them about Indian Railways, nobody would pay a heed, but just one visit there, a lot of them were interested in, so that rate link optimization problem for Indian Railways came through that. You know, took them to FedEx facility as well. So just through, you know, talking to some industry partners, we figured this out as well, that, you know, so that they can get some exciting ideas about their project. So a bunch of these things that we're doing, kind of getting them involved to learn, which is pretty hard. But yeah, so modus operandi has just been this. First 3 weeks is make them aware about what the class is, what the project should be about, what IOR has to offer. Once they get that done, we organize around 3 field trips every semester. Usually 2 before the midsem, 1 after the midsem, because they get involved with other things after the midsem. Couple of field trips before also helps them figure out their projects that they want to work on. I think 5 weeks into it, they have to have a concrete proposal with a timeline. Again, nobody holds them to the timeline. You know, those timelines are just to set the bench, you know, those milestones for themselves. Also for them to realize that it's something to look back at when they're at the end. What I started out with, and most of the times they're not the same things. They end up with a completely different thing than what they started out, but it's still fruitful. They have, after they finalized their proposal, this time I had 8 TAs, 8 UG TAs from the folks who took it last year with me, because they understood what the soul of this course was, and they really made my life super easy, because now I was meeting with not every single group every week, but we had bi-weekly meetings with us. So half the class that week was meeting with the TAs, and every TA was assigned seven groups. So 7 groups of 28 students, much easier to deal with. And because they kind of, most of them are damp mentors, they kind of associate with these kids well. So eventually, this time it was definitely less load. The projects were equally good. Having done the evaluation, at least the final evaluation, 2 different ways, I've also realized that, so the first time we did it, we had in-person presentations from every group, and we were giving them critical criticism or feedback, constructive feedback, whatever you might say. But some of them were actually scared about what grade they will get, because even after doing, so one person is always the examiner, right? If I was the mentor for OR projects, the other instructor becomes the examiner. And if they took if they did IE projects, then I end up being the examiner, and I ask them questions, and if they can't answer certain things, that leaves them with sort of a fear that, I may not have done well, because all this, during the semester, they were only getting positive feedback, positive reinforcements, trying to do good, and suddenly someone has kind of criticized their work through a lens that was not available to them. But at the end, the last time we had a lot of good things that we heard after the grade was released, because most of them, having done good things, eventually got a good grade. But this time, when we asked them to present, so VMCC 4th floor, we did a poster session. I invited faculty members to come and see their projects. So Jayendran, who's the head IUR, he came, and kids were actually pulling him, please come see my work, please come see my work. And he was baffled that nobody does that to him. Like, who has ever asked him? And these kids were pulling him to have a look. And all these examiners who came, well, examiners, quote unquote, they said good things about their projects. So now if they get a bad grade, they get, even getting a BC would be like, hey, my examiner said a lot of good things, even though you didn't do anything. My examiner said a lot of good things about my project. Why did I get a BC? So I think there are all these things that this was one thing I tried out. Probably will go back to having an evaluation where they can receive some constructive feedback instead of just appreciation for several other things. So yeah, that was kind of, in essence, what we've been doing with this course. Course as of now, it's not a perfect course by any means. There are a lot of other things that can be improved. One of my favorite feedback is this thing that one of the students wrote this time around. And nobody told them that they had to attend classes, but they themselves realized, like, having that realization that, yeah, I should have attended classes, but I did not, and that's my fault. And hey, while what you're doing, all those positive reinforcement might work, but we are students for whom we need negative reinforcements. Someone telling that to you is brilliant, yeah, whatever happened. But so there is, obviously, while I can sort of accomplish certain things by meeting them personally, one-on-one. I think if they were to come to classes, that will make their life and my life a lot easier, because you'll not have to repeat certain things. They can be more productive during the initial part of their projects, end up doing a lot more. So this is one thing that I still need to figure out, how to kind of have them come to classes, knowing. So one of the students this time around, they had a severe hearing and speaking impairment. And since I do blackboard teaching, the moment I turn my back, they can't even read my lips. And in LA 001, I mean, it doesn't matter wherever you are sitting, you can't read the lips of instructor anyway. So I asked that student to, giving them my personal time every week, 2 hours. I'll teach them whatever I've been sort of covering in class. The moment they realized that there is no exam in the course, they stopped coming. This is when the instructor, is volunteering to give their own time to make certain things more clear. But the moment they realize there are no exams in the class, they just stop coming. So there are challenges, and I haven't figured out some of those fringe elements. But at least the way the course stands now, it's a big class, it's a challenge, but I enjoy doing it. It was not enjoyable in the previous iteration. Sure, there were some, I guess to make a course successful, and it's a fairly successful course at this point. I think with what kind of things that these students are doing, how less stressful they are, which they clearly sort of mention in the feedback sometimes, and what they end up learning from this course. 7 of them who were interning in Bain, BCG, some hedge funds, all of them decided all of that is boring, they're not enjoying that. There's no sort of personal development that is happening, and they all decided to enroll for a master's at least, if not a PhD program. So yeah, I'm happy. I like doing what I'm doing. There are tons of challenges, but yeah, these are just some tidbits that I've been kind of going through. And if you have any questions, if you have any inputs for me to try out, I'll be super grateful.
Just so I understand, you did classes, actually in-person classes, only for the first month or so, and then you...
No. So the classes happened all through the semester. So the first 3 weeks were just giving them overview of what IUR has to offer and what their projects, what is the scope of their projects. And afterwards it was just giving them those tools through the class. Yes.
It's a question because the Dean AP keeps telling us through the UG rule book that this kind of evaluation is not recommended or so on. The question is not about the rule book. The question is, what will it take away if you did 75% project-based and a 25% end semester? It's just a hypothetical question.
And this is something I've kind of been sort of thinking about as well. I think having them, for me, it was just a matter of, can I manage? So the idea was that, can I not be uber objective? Just because, what about if someone's been doing extremely well in their project, right? So this origami project was eventually published in Caltech undergraduates. So I'm also sort of trying to facilitate them publishing these works in undergrad journals if it is really that good. Not peer-reviewed stuff, but still getting some appreciation. But if that person did not have a great time during those 3 hours, I would not feel good about not giving that person a good grade. That has always been the conundrum that I kind of get confounded with. Even if this was a 25% NSEM, and we have often kind of toyed with the idea of, why not just let them ask about what they learned during the project, what kind of tools have they, how they, because we have information about their projects, why not just ask them how they encountered certain problems? At least this will also get to, give you a deeper insight into who's really been working and who hasn't, which for the most part becomes apparent if you meet them every week. But yeah, so there are all these questions having so I'm not sure with, I mean, again, I still need to get DUGC approval every time I do this course, but having exams and quizzes in this course, it takes away some flavor of what this really is. Not saying them completely sort of, against the idea. I think as this person has, clearly outlined that they need some of those things, having quizzes, I mean, they're imploring me to have quizzes instead of not having quizzes. So maybe that is something I can try to do next time.
So my question is sort of related to what Anu asked, but not from the assessment perspective. So let's say I'm an instructor. I mean, I really like some of the ideas that you said. For whatever reason, I don't want to do 100% projects, but you have done it, you have all this experience. So do you have any recommendations for somebody who wants to incorporate projects, some percent, maybe 30%, 40% in their class, but not go all in?
Sure. I guess the challenge for me was the size of the class. Doing half a semester worth of project, or let's say the final 4-week project, was not something that I could get the kids excited about. They will not accomplish much. But for a smaller class, I do think that, for example, Darshan, who's not present here, he tried something similar last time where, the course worked. I mean, the students were informed that, the second half of the course is going to be a project-based component. The first half is assessment, the usual assessment, quizzes, assignments, a mid-semester exam. I think, there is this notion of like, yeah, sure, you've given them all the tools. Now, in the second half, they can kind of just take those tools and figure out what they want to do. I would say that they need a lot of time to come up with projects. So if you're thinking of having half a semester worth of or 4 weeks worth of project, give them this idea that they have to come up with their own project topics through whatever they've been learning through the first half of the semester. Whatever tools they've acquired, whatever they figure is possible through the use of these tools. Or you can have projects that you decide on your own and offer them those in, but the reason why I do it this way is because I want them to be 100% committed to the idea that they've personally sort of figured out. Whether it's just about, managing the hostel mess, but we make sure that it's a considerable amount of work, the kind of problem statement. But yeah, for a smaller class, I would say if I were to do it, I would make sure that they're a priori told in advance to keep a lookout for what they want to do in the project. Because with half a semester worth of project, you want them to be involved in doing something for that second half. The first time I did this, it turned out to be half a semester project because the first half was just involved in letting them figure out what they want to do and making sure that proposals were in line with the quantum of work involved. So yeah, I mean, I think having that information is very important, because if you, after half a semester, if you ask them to come up with project topics, there won't be much time left to really do anything substantial.